Okay, good morning, everyone. So we are ready to start. Thank you, Barak. I think it's been a very interesting discussion so far over the last 2 days. It's pretty much the very last session. And the objective of this session is to talk about the emerging trends in domain name system security. This is not DNSSEC. We are talking about how to ensure the continued operations of the ccTLD or the registry operations in taking into consideration that these are really critical infrastructure and services, critical internet infrastructure services that are being provided. So we have a very good panel with us this morning. To start off will be Clifford D'Souza from Logic Boxes. He is part of the business development team at Logic Boxes and leads the ccTLD automation projects for Logic Boxes around the world. He's been very successful working with ccTLD registries across the globe to help them automate and grow their businesses in terms of numbers, revenues for several years now. So I would like to invite him to start off with discussing how to boost ccTLD growth through automation. So welcome, Clifford.
I'll check. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once again at AfriDNS. This is my second time here at the African Forum. The first time was in Nairobi, so very pleased to see a lot of familiar faces over here. This is a very interesting panel discussion or workshop of sorts where we basically come up with ideas that will help your ccTLD grow. Through automation, through business continuity, capacity building, the different processes involved, and thanks to DNS Africa as well for being a part of this discussion. And I'm sure that we'll be able to add a lot of value to this discussion moving forward. I'm here to talk about how you can do more with what you have right now for your ccTLD. You as ccTLD managers have the ability to control the kind of distribution and marketing for your TLD in your region, or if you're looking to go global, that's everything in your hands. So I'm here to basically talk about how we think. So we've worked with ccTLD registries in the past. We've been working with them for the last decade or so. And I'm here to share experiences, a case study, and a few pointers as well. So the agenda for today is firstly I'll talk about Logic Boxes and what exactly we do. I'll also cover the state of the industry, where it is at right now in terms of ccTLDs or domain names in general. I'll also talk about the TLD distribution strategy at this point in time as to how exactly ccTLD registries have been channeling their TLDs through registrars, to customers, through resellers, local organizations. And I'd like to cover how can your ccTLD actually achieve its full potential as well. And then obviously it wouldn't make sense if I didn't give you a proof of concept. So I have a case study as well to support the kind of points I will be putting forward. So firstly about Logic Boxes, apologize for the numbers are a little outdated. So we are the 4th largest domain registrar in the world. We are an ICANN accredited registrar. We don't do retail. We don't go to end customers directly. So we are a wholesale registrar. We have more than 100 ICANN accredited registrars on our platform, more than 100,000 domain resellers who do the business for us. So they sell domain names for us to their end customers. So we have around 11 million domains under management at this point in time across GTLDs, ccTLDs, etc. We roughly add around 320,000 domain names every single month. And we have partners across different verticals. We have registries, registrars, new TLDs, web hosting companies, domain resellers, etc. Firstly, a few stats to look at. This is the internet penetration data that we've got from different portals on the internet. If you look at the third row, which is Africa, right now, if you see the internet user growth over the last 15 years has been tremendous. The growth is 6,000% over what exactly it was earlier. And at the same time, the penetration rate as compared to other regions as well is pretty high, which is at 26.5%. The internet user distribution, so traditionally what has been happening is it's been between the developed economies and the emerging economies. And the distribution is such that it has evolved to a stage where right now the number of registrations from developed economies and from emerging economies are more or less the same. And what we project in the next 5 years, depending on, based on what the data is over the last 5 to 10 years, the next 5 years, I think the emerging economies, the markets like Asia, Africa, they will actually overtake the number of registrations in these across the globe. So basically, developing economies will have more registrations than emerging economies at this point in time. Developed economies, The TLD distribution strategy. So let's take a step back, or let's take a couple of years back when there were just a handful of TLDs out there, right? We had a set number of GTLDs, a set number of ccTLDs, and a set number of registrars to sell those TLDs to your end customers. Then the new GTLDs were launched, and all of a sudden, from 26 GTLDs and 200 odd ccTLDs, we had more than 1,000 GTLDs available to all of your customers to all of your registrars to sell. So the number of registrars did not increase proportionately as compared to the number of TLDs in the market that increased. And at the same time, this is how your ccTLD looks like on a registrar's website. A registrar has a lot of TLDs to sell. Your registrar can prioritize what to sell, what to display on the home page, depending on the kind of marketing support that registrar receives from ccTLD registries. So your TLD is basically somewhere over here in this storefront that you see. And as I said, right, registrars choose which TLD they want to market, which TLD they want to focus on selling, and that obviously depends on the kind of relationship that they have with ccTLD registries. Now, the implications of such a distribution strategy is basically there's severe competition on the registrar storefront. Which TLD? Now, the registrar cannot promote all 1,000 TLDs available out there on his front page. So he has to prioritize. So there's severe competition in between registries to do that. And at the same time, registries will need to compete with fellow registries for marketing support as well. So in terms of funds granted or collaterals or marketing help that is required, there is, they would need registrars to market that specific TLD. So there is severe competition there. And at the same time, there comes a point where registries will have to rethink their distribution strategy, how to better place their TLD on the registrar storefront or in the market as compared to the other TLDs out there. So the question is, what do you do? And this is what Logicboxes thinks is something that will be beneficial for your specific TLD. So number one is take control of distribution and ensure success. Now, a lot of your TLDs, a lot of the TLDs, ccTLDs out here, you follow the 3R model. Some of you follow the 2R model. What I basically recommend is basically take control of your distribution while having your registrar partnerships in place as well. So I'm talking about not to eliminate dependability on third-party registrars. I'm just saying reduce dependability. So this would mean reaching out directly to customers and addressing their needs. So channeling your TLD through a dedicated storefront which sells only your specific ccTLD and other products and services along with that specific TLD. And at the same time, now there has been a lot of talk about how you want to approach global registrars to partner to sell your TLD on your behalf. But at the same time, it's very important to partner with the right kind of organizations in your country, because no one will have that kind of access to your customers like your local organizations, like universities, telecom companies, ISPs, who have a direct contact with your customers. So you can sign them up as your resellers or your registrars to sell your TLD locally in your country. Now, the ideal solution in this case is to get the best of both. So I'm being completely honest. Registrars are important, of course, for you to sell your TLD to your end customers. But at the same time, what we think is also follow the 2R model, where you basically reach out to your end customers directly and have like a storefront where you basically channel your TLD directly to your end customer. Now, how can your ccTLD achieve its full potential? So, a flagship storefront, a website, a basic site which sells only your TLD, nothing else. There are two scenarios. One is your registrant, your end customer, goes to a registrar site to buy your ccTLD. But at the same time, he sees hundreds and thousands of TLDs out there. So obviously the registrant is spoiled for choice. There are so many choices available. That customer may end up buying the TLD he came there for, or he may end up buying something else which is more attractive, or which might be available in that specific namespace. So having a website to sell your TLD directly to your customers and then like an impressive basic site is a must. Building a distribution network like a reseller network, like I mentioned, providing your local organizations access to sell TLDs on your behalf, that is something that you can do as well. Number 3 is a very important point that we'll be covering across this discussion is automating business functions. Now, I know a lot of ccTLDs over here in this room, and I've spoken to several ccTLDs in the past. And we're talking about manual processes for registering domain names. So much that a customer, if he wants to buy a domain name, has to download a PDF form from the registry site, fill it up, send it across. Then the information is verified, and then it takes around 7 to 10 days for the domain name to be activated. If I, right now in 2016, want to buy a domain name, and if I have to go through this process, I might rethink my options, and might as well go to something or go to a specific TLD, which could probably give me a domain name faster, maybe in seconds or minutes. So automating business functions is a very key point over here. Automating in the sense of domain provisioning, payment gateways, payment methods, billing, taxation, reporting. It needs to be automated. And there are providers out there. Logiboxes does that. Logiboxes does it for a lot of ccTLDs, where we've automated end-to-end functions, marketing, sales, provisioning, billing, etc., end-to-end, which makes life easier for ccTLDs, right? Number 4 is sell additional high revenue web products. Now this is a very interesting point, because I've noticed a lot of ccTLDs that we have partnered with who earn more out of web products than per domain. Now look at a per domain model where you just sell a domain name and say, for example, you make around $15 a year on that specific domain name as the registry. Now, what will your customer do with that specific domain name? He would obviously need a website. He would need to build a website. He would need email solutions. If you're not providing that, your customer is going to some other site to buy those products and services. What if you had the ability to sell exactly those products along with your domain name on your website? You're creating a one-stop shop for your customers. You're basically making sure that your customer comes to your website, buys everything from you, And obviously, he will not buy it just for 6 months, because he won't just have a website only for 6 months. He wants it for a while. So that makes sure that your customer stays with you for all the products and services, and he's heavily dependent on you for those services. So a basic hosting package is around $2.5 a month. And I'm just talking about hosting. Now you have site builder, you have email solutions. You can provide all of them bundled into one specific package to your customers. And imagine the amount of revenue that can come out of it over and above the domain name sales that you do. Something like this. This is our white label flagship storefront. This is how it exactly looks like. Now you can basically go ahead and implement this, put up your branding, change the language, change the currency, move things around here and there. It looks attractive. It looks like it's asking the customer to buy a domain name right away. And not just a domain name, but other products and services as well. A wholesale network for your ccTLD, along with registrars globally or within the country, enable resellers, enable organizations to sell TLD on your behalf. And at the same time, exactly the second point, right? Distributors who have already built a relation with their customers. Why go out and market your TLD extensively to reach your customers when you already have distributors in your country who have access to the customers already? These business critical functions, marketing, taxation, billing, online payment methods, everything can be automated. So why follow the manual processes while you can basically use a service like this and automate everything on your end? And then again, I spoke about web products like email, websites, web hosting, certificates, everything that can be provided to your customers along with the domain name. Now, a proof of concept, one of our partners is .mn, which is the ccTLD for Mongolia. Now, they partnered with Logic Boxes in 2005. Now, at that point in time, they had only registrar partners locally. And their number of domain names at that point in time was around 3,300 domain names. What they wanted to do is they also wanted to open a distribution channel which is direct to other customers. So while partnering with their existing registrars, they went direct to customer as well. So they followed 3R and they followed a 2R model as well. Right now in 2015, we checked on quick stats on the number of domain names that they have. They have 16,000 domain names under management. Now this is the total domain name count in the entire .mn namespace. Out of 16,000, so the namespace growth actually was 350% from what it was 15 years ago. And their direct channel constituted of 75% of the entire .mn namespace. So they sold 75% of the entire namespace direct from their channel. A very interesting point here is the number of email and web hosting orders that they have added. They have added more than 3,500 hosting orders. These are billed per month. And these are billed in like dollar figures of $2 or $3 per package. So the amount of revenue that these guys have earned, .mn have earned over the last 10 years through only other products and services is pretty huge. This is a sample of their website. You know, they took our white label website and changed the look and feel and displayed the TLD, their second level domains. The pricing is in the local currency. They changed the language, etc. And this is how they are establishing that local connect with their end customers by selling just their TLD and nothing else. Some of our ccTLD partners, as you see on the screen right now, is MN, Mongolia, Montenegro, Belize, Colombia, Honduras. There are a few more as well. And obviously, Logic Boxes being a wholesale registrar, we also have registrar partners in Africa. Some of them are Upperlink, Peal, Web for Africa, Ghana.com. We have Genius Communications as well. I'm sorry I missed that on the list. There are several partners who sell TLDs for Logic Boxes in those specific regions. So I'm around over here. I'm around at the ICANN event as well. If you want to have like a no obligation discussion with me regarding your ccTLD plans, your growth plans, where you stand right now, what have you decided in terms of marketing, distribution, etc. Do get in touch with me. I'm around and I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clifford. That's a very interesting presentation, and I like the case study of Mongolia. So I would like to take questions because the discussion format we have this morning is sort of progressive. First, we want to understand how do we help the ccTLDs or registries and registrars to grow, and then after that, we are going to progress and try and understand then how do you secure the business continuity. So we've seen a very good case study of how a ccTLD can grow from 3,500, from 3,500 to 16,000 domain names over a period of 10 years. And I mean, Mongolia is not a big country, which makes that case even more interesting. So the question I would like to lead us off to in this brief discussion is, there is always a cost to automation. And looking at Mongolia, it's a very small country, so the ccTLD may not have the resources to invest in automation. So what approaches should ccTLDs and registrars consider, especially when outsourcing for automation, or if they choose to do in-house development to achieve automation solutions? Or what should they think about in making a choice?
Right. Thank you so much for that question. So, regarding, so it's basically a case of build versus buy, right? If you want to automate, you basically build something that automates all business functions for you, or you buy from a provider who's already automated it and who's already, has a robust platform. Now, in terms of buying a solution versus building a solution, now you need to have a tried and tested platform, which has evolved over a period of over a decade or so. So with Logic Boxes, the kind of platform that we have several partners. We're like the fourth largest web presence provider in the world. So it has evolved over a period of years. It's tried and tested with several developers, hundreds of developers working on the platform day in, day out. That basically would make sense in terms of using automation through a service provider than building one in-house. When you talk about costs, right, this is obviously the most common question I come across, because when I talk about automating business functions and providing other products and services, a website, etc., what are the costs involved? Obviously, the way we have positioned this product easy access to the kind of solution that we provide, we don't charge them there are no humongous costs. There are no annual fees or fixed fees, etc. We basically believe in the model that we grow as you grow. So basically, depending on the kind of business that the registry does through us, we basically have our growth in terms of numbers and revenue as well. So it's very cost effective. I wouldn't go into numbers right now. Maybe, if any ccTLD would want to discuss this with me, I'll be more than happy to do that. But at the same time, I'd like to ensure that we are here for a reason. We're in Africa. I'm here to tell you guys this is available for a reason, and that is because we think it's very cost effective, and at the same time there's a lot more that you can do with your ccTLD right now.
Thank you. DNS Services also provides backend solutions. I mean, what's your thought on the same?
Well, just some anecdotal information about automation just before we get there. We automated our system in 1995 with an SMTP/email system, and we offered early online payments in the early 2000s, and then we switched to EPP, or we added EPP as a automation. We kept the email as a sideline, and when we added EPP, we switched from about 8,000 domains per month growth to 20,000 domains per month. I think our best month was 24,000 domains in 1 month as a growth above deletions. So automation definitely pays in terms of domain growth. And as you said, then comes the cost of maintaining all the systems for these domains. In terms of providing backend services for ccTLDs in Africa, DNS is very interested in helping ccTLDs, either with the fixed cost per year system or a we grow with you grow option. We're very open. The prices aren't fixed. They're very negotiable, and it really depends on the position that the ccTLD wants to take. Obviously, the more quirky you want to make the system, the more difficult it is to make it cheap. But if you want a system that looks like a GTLD and runs like a GTLD/ccTLD, we can do that very easily. And we've got a lot of experience in migrating from legacy systems to an EPP system while maintaining your customer relationships with your legacy registrars.
Comments? Any questions from the ccTLDs or the registrars in the room? No? Or have we lost them? Okay, so fair enough. So you've been able to grow. I mean, from to 24,000 on a peak month. That's a huge growth in a month. 24,000 domain names. So let's go on to the next point. You're growing. You've managed to get the automation in place, and the ccTLD is growing. It means you become a critical infrastructure. What are the factors that you need to think about with respect to the business continuity? And with that, I would like to invite David Peal to take us through some of the things the ccTLD needs to think about with respect to the continuity, business continuity of the registry. Barak, if you could help put the presentation up. And David Peal is going to talk about that. David works for DNS Services in South Africa, which provides the back-end services for ZACR, and he will have a few things to talk about with respect to the business continuity from a ccTLD point of view.
Sure. There's only one slide. If Barak can give that to me.
Next slide. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to hit you with 1,000 slides, but basically the best way I thought to look at business continuity was to assess what the risks would be and then to address each of those risks. And I see them most as discussion points. I'm going to provide what I see as the risk, and we can talk about potential solutions to each of those. The first one is infrastructure, and it's been coming up in a couple of the other talks. Is Africa's infrastructure is not amazing. We have power cuts, we have power failures, and the telecoms, your cell phone works here and doesn't work there. But the real experience of running a 24/7 service in Africa is not the same. Often the power and telecoms experiences that general public feel or have the effect of are not the same as what you obtain in the data centers and the mature telecoms network services. For example, in South Africa, we've had rolling blackouts for months, and the public have had a really rough time about it. But in actual effect, the telecom services and the registry services and the services inside the data centers don't experience those sort of outages. And so I think that infrastructure is mostly covered by the fundamental services provided by these kind of entities. So I think it's mostly addressed in that. And you can find data centers in multiple cities in each country. So often you can get your geographic diversity without too much trouble. The other thing that is a big risk for ccTL registries is new laws and regulations, especially when they're restrictive policies. They can have a negative effect on the registry. This can be difficult for registries to make changes in their systems. I know some of the systems that registry uses are quite they're rigid, and a change requires code, a change requires development time. But not only that, the registrars see these changes and have to make code changes and have to integrate these. I coin them as quirks because they are different from the norm in terms of EPP, a standard EPP. And I know a standard EPP is sort of a misnomer, but in the standard EPP environment, they are quirks. And every time these changes come along, businesses don't like change. They don't like to spend money on what they see as additional work. With the environment being 1,500 GTLDs and 500 registries for getting integrated into the market if you have additional development requirements. So I see that as a business problem, that you're going to lose customers or you're going to chase customers away by having restrictive and strange laws and policies around your registry. The other thing is skills retention. It doesn't only apply to the ccTLD market. I think this applies to general IT in Africa. Once you train someone up and they become valuable, it can be hard to retain them as a skill. It's also common for a ccTL registry to only have one or just a few staff members who are critical to the organization. And losing one of those members can be detrimental to the running of the organization. That leaves the organization in a vulnerable state to both cyber attacks or even just general day-to-day running trouble. And I think that a number of African ccTLDs could maybe look at mutual support agreements. I mean, if we work together, this could be something that mutual as in reciprocal support agreements. It could be a way of solving that, the overlap between getting new staff up and trained and losing your members. So having a neighbor that you can call on if you're in trouble is probably a good idea. The other thing I see as a risk to businesses, to ccTLDs, is the currency fluctuations. This has actually hit us quite hard in South Africa quite recently. We had 3 finance ministers in 2 days, I think, and our currency devalued by 30% in one day. We have a number of services we buy in dollars or euros or krona, and these services and the cost of these services and equipment go up by 30% in one day, but your income doesn't change. And one of the ways that we are thinking of offsetting this potential vulnerability is to operate some services in dollar and euro-based currencies. And this goes to some of the stuff that Neil was talking about or introduced. And the idea is that ccTLDs have a captive market in terms of their registrars. And entering the value chain for the greater GTLD market could be a way of them having dual currency income, both selling their own domains and selling GTLDs to their customers and other ccTLDs. And this also talks to the next threat, which is the market changes. With so many GTLDs in the market, ccTLDs are no longer one of the many. They're one of the few. They're now one of the many, and there's so much choice for registrants that they will need to expand their market to capture more value in the chain. Think of how the internet works. Well, this is just one of our ideas. If we think about how the internet works, autonomous systems each run their own network, and they're called ISs generally, and they peer at things called internet exchange points, and they agree to exchange traffic for each other's networks. And we foresee that a model for ccTLDs to leapfrog technology that the Europeans and Americans have done so far is to implement a similar architecture where ccTLDs can set up an exchange point or gateway between each other and agree to exchange each other's products for their captive market. DNS is actually working on a product to solve this, and we were looking to champion this as an African product, a gateway for African ccTLDs to do business with each other directly and better serve their own captive market of registrars. And we're looking for ccTLDs who are interested in joining.
Thank you very much for those comments, for those points. And I think you raise very interesting points here. Having been involved with the ccTLD in Kenya, we recently had to move to a data center just to try and keep the ccTLD up and running because of problems related to power and connectivity, whereas inside the data center, power is stable and connectivity is more or less, guaranteed because the exchange point is there, all the operators are there, they have multiple backhaul connectivity to that particular facility, and the uptime has moved up to 99.95% the last time I checked, which was significantly huge compared to what has been over the last few years. So I'd like to open up for questions as well on this issue of business continuity. I know there are ccTLDs in the room. The mic is there. And as I wait for someone to go up to the mic, I do have a question for David. So one of the things which I have observed is that ccTLDs seem to not prioritize this business continuity aspects. They don't look at this more critically. And I come from a place where I've seen my own country ccTLD not take some of these points seriously. Having been in operation since 2004, 2003 actually, to be more precise, moving to a data center in 2016 means we've taken a very long time to provide that level of, stable services to the community. We've still had new laws coming in. I pretty much know that the registrars were recently put through a process where there is a new regulation about how registrars should operate. Some weren't happy about it. There is a challenge of losing skills. Staff do leave the ccTLD, and there's a process where you have to start all over afresh. If I look at just the ccTLD that is in Kenya, where I come from, they've pretty much gone through all these points in the last 2 years at a very, I'll say, serious level. And I don't know about other countries, but, I would pretty much say that they've at least gone through one of these points. But why is it that they don't prioritize in paying a lot more attention on these issues? Is it a financial issue? Is it a management issue? What's your experience when you talk to them?
I think it's often a question of capacity. When you just trying to get going and trying to grow, the question of keeping it running isn't in the forefront of their mind. Perhaps it may be as simple as that, but maybe the question goes to the audience.
I see .sn on the floor, so.
Ok, je pense que c'est vrai que en fait, je pense que tous ces problèmes sont des problèmes qui sont pris en charge par les registres nationaux de toute façon. Mais en fait, on fait face à plusieurs aspects. Le premier aspect, c'est la taille du marché et les investissements nécessaires. Aujourd'hui, si l'on veut avoir des infrastructures, il faudrait qu'il y ait une offre locale en termes d'infrastructures qui n'existe pratiquement pas. On n'est pas des... On met en fait des...
That is usually only given by the operators that have a commercial vision of the services that they offer. So there's a problem that causes a problem of accessibility to these infrastructures, and I think that the small registrars in Africa are facing this problem, especially when the regulation and the legislation requires that those registers be independent from the operators, which is the case with the guidelines in West Africa with the UMOA. The guidelines say that the register has to be put in place at the level of the regulators, and they have to remain neutral. So the problem is What is the possibility? The possibility is to outsource those registers. But there's also the problem of regulation. We want to have to enter in the principle of data protection. And the right to have access to data, but also the regulatory frameworks asks us to regularize those data. So there's various problems. So that we cannot really face them unless there's a critical mass that could make a decision about that. And the interest of this forum is to be able to see what influence we can have on the policies, so that we can put in place regional strategies that will enable us to come up with the answers. I don't think that the problem today is about the risk of the GTLDs. I think that there's a problem of what I call a digital identity, how to promote the digital identity in our country so that companies and individuals in our countries can use their own extensions for economical reasons, obviously, because there's a very strong link between marketing and this market. So there's a lot of problems that were properly listed by the two analysts, but we have to look at what are the better and the most relevant solutions. Perhaps I answer to some of Michuki's concerns. Merci, Alex.
And indeed, I think one of the points which you made is that there is need to be collaboration in the way we approach our respective government and regional economic blocks to discuss some of these issues. And I think that's pretty much covered in the theme of this year's event. And I hope at the end of this meeting we will have some takeaways that can help, we can take with us to try and see what we can do over the next 12 months to advance the key points that are coming out of these discussions. Now, moving on, I would like to invite Mark Elkins to sort of take a deep dive into one of these points of business continuity, which talks about infrastructure. With respect to one of the previous points that has been discussed is about the challenges of infrastructure. You know, how do you move your, how to operate your ccTLD in a way that it is stable by moving it to a proper data center where there's good access and power. But that only limits you to that particular country or that particular location. But how do you make sure that you have more continuity and stability across the entire region? And one of these discussion is talking about DNS and Anycast with respect to the African context. How can we actually build on this? So it just goes slightly deeper into the issue of business continuity on the infrastructure side. So Mark Elkins. Mark Elkins, as he takes the floor, works for DNS services with the previous speaker, and they provide back-end services for ZACR and COSA and others.
Thank you, Michuki. My name is Mark Elkins, yes. And I'm going to leave that slide up there, and I've only got the one slide prompting me here as one of the important, interesting things that when you go around looking and shopping for systems to automate your system with is normally you have to take your current business rules, throw them out the window, and adopt the business rules that the piece of software that you just bought applies to you, and you have to work within these new rules. One of the really cute features of the DNS EPP system, by the way, is you can keep your existing business rules and shape the EPP DNS system to meet those rules. So it's actually quite flexible. So you don't have to change, the software changes, and that's all built into the software. So if we're looking at a little bit about the effects of currency fluctuations and infrastructure, something flashed there, and how we can look at that, and how we can look at not being damaged by those things. There's one other thing out there in the big bad world, and that is if an organization or a group decides they do not like you, they can literally take you apart. They can take you down by DDoSing your name servers and things like that. Now, in the history of COSA, we had one disaster that lasted 3 days. The old system that I wrote, the old legacy system, we couldn't take registrations for 3 days. Everything else worked fine. Whois system worked fine. The name servers worked fine. And I think even back then we were playing with things like Anycast. So everything else worked fine apart from that. So we did have our own one-off disaster. And that's where we had tape backups, and then we discovered that our data was so big that tape backups were literally going to take a day or two to restore. So just because you back up stuff doesn't mean to say it's necessarily secure. Anyway, moving on. People that are using Anycast at the moment, and really Anycast is one of these great things that does solve this problem, it's fine while it's free, while your numbers are low. As soon as you hit certain target levels, like 100,000, 50,000, whatever it is, you find that you have to start paying for these services. And you hope that won't be a problem until you have to start paying. So, please, think about this. What happens when you have to pay? So, the Afrinic has a free DNS Anycast service, and a couple of other organizations can also provide that. And having more than one Anycast service provider probably makes sense in case one of them doesn't work or you have a disagreement with them. Well, where can one have a disagreement? Well, if you look at the sorry case of, I think it was Slovenia or one of those states over there, their currency depreciated so much they could no longer afford the services of one of the large Anycast providers. And they actually ended up having to walk away. So how can we stop this from happening? To give you an idea, our current Anycast provider, which is NetNode, they have 40 instances of their system around the world. In any 1 second, adding all queries for the co.za domain name system, which is, as you know, over 1 million domain names, the query rate is never more than a collective 2,000 per second. 2,000 queries for the whole of the world on the single name server, 40 instances around the world. So that's not very many. So in reality, what we've done at COSA is we've bought this Lamborghini and we're using it to go to the shops. Like we may as well have bought a Mini. So maybe we've kind of overbought on that. It also costs quite a lot of money. To compare that, if we look at the queries per second rate on a static unicast name server, and we have several of those, it's more like 350 queries per second. So definitely the Anycast system is working for us and working nicely. So here is a proposal to African ccTLD members. DNS is quite happy to create a cluster, and we'll stick it in Johannesburg, and we'll probably stick an instance or two in the USA, and in Europe, and in Asia. We would like to propose that if ccTLD managers or ccTLD instances purchase their own hardware that is suitable for such an Anycast environment, and pay for the connectivity, look after it locally and stuff like that, and then that node is added to the Anycast cloud that we're trying to create, that they then have full access to the whole of the Anycast system. And maybe when numbers get really big, we'll look at money and stuff like that, but that's a story for another day. And if we can get instances in Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, etc., then everyone in Africa can benefit from that. And that basically is where I'm going to end this, as a proposal that we look at something like that. From our point, DNS, it'll help protect us. It'll help protect our cash flow, our foreign currency cash flow. We'll be at a lot less risk, as would everyone else doing the same sort of thing. Don't get me wrong, NetNode is an absolutely fantastic service, but it's a Rolls Royce, and we don't really need that yet. Thank you.
So, Mark, if I understood you, we want to crowdsource or crowdfund for a Anycast solution for our region.
For our region, definitely, yes.
Okay. Questions from the floor? I see one already.
Yes. Did you already did a one-on-one meeting with other registries in Morocco, in Africa?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Did you already contacted other registries in Africa on this matter?
This is our invitation today.
Ach so.
Sorry, I didn't mention Morocco in that list of a few countries, but certainly that would be included, yes.
No, because you make a very clear point, and it is something which is needed in Africa. The only thing I don't agree with, that it has to be an Anycast server in South Africa and then in the US and in Europe. Because if you know, the latency within Africa is very high. So if you build your business South Africa and then Europe and then USA, then the latency issue is still hurting other African countries. So if you are going to distribute it, you should distribute it within Africa first and then look outside of Africa.
Okay, the reason I mentioned the US, Europe and Asia is because those regions definitely need to be done. But we don't have Africans running ccTLD businesses in those three places. Therefore, DNS would take the responsibility of building those clusters. But what we would expect is for African ccTLDs to do the same thing in their current country. It's local, it's easy to manage, therefore it's relatively cheap. When you talk about latency, if you've got an instance, then there is no latency. One would assume that you would take such a cluster locally and kind of park it at the exchange point.
Which one?
No, at your local exchange point.
Yeah, but sorry to correct you there. I'm an internet architect and from the Netherlands. In Africa, there are almost none interacting exchange points. And I know South Africa is well connected because of your neighbors, but in the north of Africa, there's nothing yet.
Well, hopefully this is a start to doing it. I thought there was an exchange point being built in Morocco. I thought that there was the...
9 data center only.
There's an exchange point and there's an Anycast instance of one of the root name servers here. So put it next to that. That's what I would do in Morocco. But every country is going to be different. But let that be the problem of the country involved if you want to join in.
Yeah, but those problems go hand in hand. If you want to have Anycast and you don't have exchange point in Africa, then you have a large issue because traffic like in Morocco goes through France or goes through Spain first. So there's a latency issue. So if you want to have Anycast with a low latency in Africa, you have also look at the other issue, which is the underlying infrastructure which is missing in Africa at this moment.
So we're going to eat this elephant one mouthful at a time. We have to start somewhere.
We can eat together.
The tail, the thin end.
May I remark about the previous issue? About the other business risk. I'm missing nepotism, I'm missing corruption, and I'm missing incompetence. Because those are very available in Africa, which I've noticed in the last 10 years.
Could you care to elaborate what you mean?
Well, if you talk about business risks in your previous slide, well, Africa has an issue with nepotism and with corruption, and those issues are not addressed, but they are still there. And there are several levels. It can be an employee, it can be at the government level, it can be in all levels. The other thing is incompetence. What I have noticed is that a lot of people have certain functions in companies or at suppliers or at governments, and they are very incompetent in what they say. So they have a title that they are engineer in a certain field, and in fact they do not have any clue. And that's a large risk which I've noticed here in Africa since the last 10 years.
Okay. All right. Well noted. I had seen someone. Do you want a response for that?
No, actually not. I just wonder if it is going to be addressed at the next meeting.
Well, I think a few points have been raised on that particular one. I did notice one of the points which was mentioned was skills retention, and meaning that registries and AFTLD spends a lot of time training engineers, but then they also end up losing them, and then they have to start the same cycle. So that becomes a business risk in which the ccTLDs or the registries have to focus on how do you retain the skills that have been they have invested.
I have a solution for that.
Yes.
If I may.
Yeah, sure.
As I said, I'm from the Netherlands, and we are one of the oldest ccTLDs in the world. We are also the first country outside the US connected to the APRANET back in the 80s. And what the solution is for skills retention is to invest as a ccTLD in educating your people. The more people who are reaching a certain level of skills, the lesser it is going to be interesting for someone to go somewhere else. And at this moment, if you hire someone and you educate him, then he can become a competitor, or at least as a registrar. And in your case, he will go to another ccTLD or find a way to go live in the US.
Just would like to say that I think you underestimate the requirement of those kinds of skills in Africa. You would need to train hundreds of thousands of people per year.
Not actually that way. You can start with local schools. Yeah, maybe we're getting off topic. Maybe one I will explain some more. Because education starts from childhood off, and in most countries which I've noticed, they do not invest in children and know about the internet and about ccTLDs and web design, etc., etc. But if you start low, then within 2 generations you get an educated work crowd which you can use. But never mind.
Yeah, okay, so the point is noted, but I think it goes beyond the scope of what a ccTLD can actually do. And I mean, in this case, having had to work in my previous job at a ccTLD, the kind of resources we had would not enable us to do that kind of, the ccTLDs in this region are pretty small in terms of size, financial abilities, etc. So it's sort of like a chicken and egg situation where how do they then start investing in, and that becomes a larger policy issue, and engaging with the policy makers to make sure that those strategies are put in place so that the training is invested at an early level. But that's a larger policy issue. But yes, the ccTLDs being well established and run can actually have that influence on the policy side. But it's a progressive effort that the ccTLDs have to make.
Okay. But if you've got extra money that you want to invest in Africa to teach people, we're willing to. We've got our hands out.
Just on
then I should speak Afrikaans with you.
On that point, the ZACR actually developed and got a university course accredited for the training of DNS as a subject matter. That, I can't remember the name of the university that it's been put into, but that is something that has been done. and it speaks to what you're talking about. But they obviously have an abundance of resources and people and money to do that kind of thing. And I don't think that's yet available at many of the ccTLDs.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. What we're trying to say is the competence about DNS and over internet is at the ccTLDs of each nation, and those have the influence to educate first their own government, and then educate them that the benefits of having bringing their own people to the higher platform will benefit the complete nation in the long run.
From that point of view, in the early days of co.za, where most of the money was coming in from a ccTLD point of view, we actually sent there's no regulators here, we actually paid for our regulators to go to ICANN meetings so that they could get educated by the domain name system people, because they didn't believe what we were telling them. And for the past 7 or 8 years, I've been teaching DNS training courses every 6 months, which is free to people coming on the courses, and it's intro and it's advanced, DNSSEC, etc. And the courses both last 3 or 4 days. So it's intensive training, hands-on.
Okay, so just to conclude, I think part of the theme of this, or rather the theme of this DNS forum is partnerships. So I think we can always find ways to partner and collaborate. There are quite a number of initiatives that are going on. COSA Cares is one of those initiatives which is well known in Southern Africa for developing DNS capacity. AFTLD has its effort, ICANN has its effort, the Internet Society has its effort, AFNOG has its effort. So there are quite a lot of initiative going on to try and build the capacity on the DNS front. But as the theme of this event is partnerships, how can we put all this together so that we can see the larger impact? So that's an ongoing initiative. It cannot obviously be won overnight, but there is a lot of work that has gone on the ground. If you were here a couple of years ago, I would say maybe 5 years back, and the discussions we are having today, you will notice the difference. And all this is not because of work that has been done in the last 5 years, but it's because of the work that was done 10 years before that. And we are reaping the fruits of that presently. So we acknowledge that there's not a lot that has been, there's a long way to go, but there's a lot that has been done. All right, so in the interest of time, I would like to take the next question, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Michuki. I'm William Stuckey. The previous speaker talked about internet exchange points. What's required to build an internet exchange point? About $100 worth of switch and 2 days training. It's really, really, really simple. It's not hard. Mark and I have trained people to do this all over Africa. There are lots of internet exchange points in Africa. The map that was up there a moment ago had a lot of yellow on it. The yellow was primarily Lusophone and Anglophone countries. The places with no yellow on it were primarily Francophone and Arabic-speaking countries. What is the difference between those two? It's not technicalities, it's politics. People have to be prepared to agree to connect, to set up an internet exchange point. They have to be prepared to agree where it's going to be and how it's going to be run. That's all. It's a question of talking to your neighbors, talking to your competitors, setting it up, doing it. Not hard, it's not expensive. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Anyone on the panel who wants to comment on that? I have my views, but I think they're very skewed by the fact that I'm almost on a daily basis involved in that discussion.
I totally agree with you, William.
Well, so indeed, you're right. It's we have a view that building exchange points is 80% social engineering and 20% technical engineering. You say it's 90% social engineering and 10% technical engineering, which probably valid. So that 80 or 90% social engineering cannot be done in one day. That is why it takes most of the, it takes a long time. I have been involved in in cases where we've been at this social engineering for 5 years and counting. So it is not an easy task. It is not for the faint-hearted. So the question is, what strategies should we be employing to try and overcome this 80 or 90% of the social engineering? And there is no straight answer for this. Every country, every region has its own challenges, and we try and overcome that. So we haven't found a solution that works for all, and we try and deal with every country with its respective challenges. So that 80-90%, there is no one single solution for them, and for that reason, that's why we don't have exchange points in the whole of Africa. But I have to say that the efforts for the last 15 years have been paying off. The work that you've done, the work others have done, are starting to pay off. We've seen more exchange points launched in the last 2 years than we've seen before. In 2008, there were roughly just about 12 operational exchange points that were responsive to questionnaires and providing information. Now you can get responses from about 33 exchange points in 26 countries. So that is a huge growth in terms of looking at the period where the work has been going on. And this is just bearing fruit because the panel discussion was to talk about capacity building. Have we done enough? And what gaps actually? And from what the panelists have all highlighted and the comments from the floor, it's quite obvious that there's a need. There's need for ongoing capacity building to take place so that we can have more impact with terms of the number of ccTLDs that are automating and all that. So I would like to bring back to the close with my panelists for their last comments. Now I'd like to start with David here, and then okay, then I'll start at the far end. I'll start with Mark Elkins. Back this way for final closing comments.
I don't think I have any final closing comments, except it's just in the will of the organizations and the countries to forge ahead, and please keep these partnerships open, running systems as open as possible, and let's collaborate.
As closing comments, just get out of your comfort zone. Just think ahead. There's a lot out there that you can do, and a lot of money as well. So yeah.
Yeah. On what Mark said, basically DNS has put its hands out and said we'll help with registry automation, we'll help with DNS, Anycast, and a number of other projects. If you've got ideas that you would like to see happening in Africa, DNS is a willing and wanting partner for growing the DNS industry in Africa.
Excellent. So thank you very much, and a round of applause to the panelists. And I'd like to hand over to Barak for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michuki.